Hello and welcome to Developing Opinions. This is JD Nile, and today I am going to go over The Legend of Zelda Triforce Heroes for the Nintendo 3DS. For this video, I will be going over my experience playing the game, consider why some choices may have been made, getting some opinions from my kids who also played, before diving into the developer opinions from interviews and such, and then closed with further developed thoughts. Note that this video is an experiment to see if this sort of content would have an audience. If by the end this resonates with you, please like and share so that I can have confidence to continue making this kind of content. Now, let's get started. Despite being a big Legend of Zelda fan, I did not buy every game in the series. Among those I had passed on was Triforce Heroes for the 3DS. I had enjoyed A Link Between Worlds, but when this game came and I tried the demo, I found that it would be rather annoying to play. After 10 years and my kid enjoying Echoes of Wisdom, I decided to give this game another chance and searched for 2 copies of the game. After discovering that it's either single player or 3 players for the campaign, I needed to obtain a third 3DS and therefore player. Luckily, we were able to convince my in-law to loan his 3DS, and he even played the first level with us. At this time, we found that you cannot mix download play with local play. You could also not mix Japanese and US versions. As a result, I had to hunt down another copy, but luckily that did not take too long after going to multiple shops. For the third player, we initially started with a friend, but after he showed no interest in continuing, we could recruit my other kid, who was not a gamer. The outfits did successfully attract their attention, and we began to play. Finally, the party was complete, and we ended up with 3 different levels of gaming experience. The reason why I go over all of this background information was to show perhaps the biggest flaws of the game. First, it is really expensive to get 3 players. Luckily, I only had to pay about $10 for each copy of the game, but when it released, that would have been between $30 and $40 per copy. And without everyone having their copy, you would have to use download play, which would not allow you access to the later outfits. Another obstacle I kept hearing were the kids saying that Legend of Zelda was hard, even if they were having fun. In addition, not everyone who plays has the skill required to play. That could lead to a very frustrating experience. But can it also be fun? Is there that feeling of triumph? Yes, indeed there is. Despite all these obstacles and challenges, eventually even my non-gaming kid kept requesting to play. This ended up becoming a routine as the game actually encourages. There are a few design choices that help this. First, there is the daily treasure box challenge. You can pick 1 treasure box a day for a chance at the material. These materials are needed for outfits that make the quests easier, and the challenge tends to do a good job of giving you a material you need. Even if you fail to get it, it just increases your chances for the next day, and the freebies can be sold for money or used for their own special outfit. Second, there is the daily market. If you enable all the settings, then you can select from 5 materials to buy a day, with a rare one always being among the selection. This way, even if you cannot get the material you need from the quest, there is a chance it will be available to buy soon. Third, the randomness of the quests generally mean you may need to play a level a few times to get the item you need. Sure, you can wait for it to appear in the shop, but you still need rupees to do so, and the primary method is by completing quests until you get the special outfit, which would then allow you to hedge rupees. You can sell materials too, but generally it's about 1/5 of their value. Occasionally the merchants will pay double that, but I don't think it's predictable what they'd be. The interesting thing is, due to how expensive everything is, this game probably has the best economy system of all of the Zelda games. So how is the core gameplay loop? After you get a party of 3 or decide to go alone, you pick an area. If there is descent, then the roulette happens. Then repeat the process for picking a level and again for selecting the special task after they are unlocked. Then you pick an outfit which modifies your abilities. Some upgrade a weapon, others affect what happens in the wild. Some can even grant you a bonus attack. Each level describes what items are present so that you can plan who will use which and dress accordingly. Each level is broken down into 4 stages, and all 3 need to make it to the goal. As a team, you need to advance through each stage, and the last one will always be some sort of fight. Most stages will require you to work with at least 2 items or with the totem mechanic. Since you can only equip one item, this means you need to cooperate with the team to advance. In terms of promoting cooperation, you can say this game is among the best. At the end of each level, you get to pick from one of 3 chests for a materia. Again, if you can't get the one you want, then you'll have a few options for obtaining them. In addition, the shopkeeper will give some materials for free after playing many levels in multiplayer. I think one issue here is that there is no trading system. We played one level 10 times, but my kid could never get the material wanted until I got the Lineback outfit, which allows you to see what is in the chest. The combat, items, and costume mechanic are pretty great. The way the outfits can upgrade a weapon is cool. Bosses can be a challenge to figure out at first, and then a joy when you master them. I feel like this may be the first Zelda game where the boss may have a few ways to approach. Not all the bosses have these, but we did see a few. There are some puzzles that are fairly clever as well. In addition, you can take on bonus challenges if you are up for it. Despite being completely different games and therefore uncomparable, in some instances you can say Triforce Heroes is better than A Link Between Worlds. One issue with that game was that since each dungeon could be tackled in any order, every dungeon was relatively easy and only one item was used. Here, you can have up to 3 different items, thus other mechanics, and you need to figure out how to use them. Similarly, the bosses are a challenge, and it took us normally a few tries before we figured it out, as opposed to a link between worlds. While you cannot beat all the levels in any order, you are given a good amount of choice, and even then, you actually only need to beat the last level for each area, with the other three essentially serving as training, introducing concepts, or gathering materials. While cooperation is a big strength, it is also the source of frustration. This easily could have been a game to train new players, and while it still is that, it is a frustrating experience. As the skilled player, you need to be the one who is moving and shouting instructions to the less skilled players when to attack, throw, or use an item. It's either that or telling them to run away while you take on the challenge. Running away is a critical strategy because everyone shares health. From a game design perspective, I can understand the choice, as it allows to fully embrace the totem mechanic, which this game truly does. However, this choice makes it incredibly frustrating for skilled players, as they will be held back for the most part. For example, even after clearing a stage, the less skilled player can easily walk into a hazard and force you to start from the beginning, or accidentally break the ground beneath you, causing your fall, or throw a big bomb at you, or pick you up and throw you off the stage, or kill the network connection. There is a tri-force of power, a tri-force of courage, and a tri-force of wisdom. But what is really needed here to hold it all together is a tri-force of patience. Despite all of that, when the weaker player pulls through, it is like when a new team member in a sport you have been mentoring clinches a win, and the celebration is exhilarating. Each stage acts as a checkpoint, so when your team runs out of health, you only need to start from the current stage. For the main levels, you have fairies, so you do have a few chances. There is also a jellyfish monster in the levels, which you can heal you if you do it correctly. Now, assuming you cannot get everything required for a three-person party, there is a single-player mode. Here, you gain two doppels to complete the team. Like in multiplayer, all three need to make it to the goal. This will often mean you will need to totem or strategically place the doppels. You can and will need to switch between them. On the bright side, these doppels do not take damage, so the switch mechanic can be very useful. A few levels that are easier in single player due to this. In addition, if you control the correct character in the totem, then you can both move and attack. The main downside is that you can only pick one outfit, and some levels are better when having at least two. Another mode, which can be actually played with only two people, is the Colosseum. It is just player versus player combat, with each stage modeled after the main campaign areas. The goal is to have lost the least number of hearts, and the winner gets an item. If there are only two players, Then the annoying hand monster will appear and one-hit KO whoever it touches. This is the intended method of obtaining certain materials, but I hear if you complete all of the challenges for an area, then the king will give you the material. Something that is actually fun to do in the lobby while waiting is a musical hacky sack. If you dash into the wall, then often a ball will drop. Hit that, and it will start playing a Zelda tune throughout the series. If you want to keep listening to it, you will need to keep it in the air. It is a challenge alone and can be tricky with friends, but it is a bit fun, even if the reward is just 1 or 2 rupees. My kids often told me not to join a lobby as they were trying to do the challenge. Now that I've covered gameplay, how was the story? To that I ask, what story? Okay. There is a story, but in my opinion, it actually gets in the way. I was actually worried my kids would lose interest before we even started because it takes so long before you can start the adventure. That's even worse if your 3DS did not have the latest update for both the game and the 3DS. But luckily, the eShop still allowed us to download the latest updates. In the end, after 31 hours of playtime and launching the game 41 times, we beat the game. Most days tended to play for more than 30 minutes, but some sessions taking over 2 hours. But even then, we still boot up the game and continue to play. If you were to ask my thoughts on the game after I beat it, you could say I was split. The items were good, the bosses were good, the music it is great as always, and there are some good moments to be had. The main issue is that it probably was most fun with 3 skilled Zelda players, but it was hard enough just to get 3 people willing to play. With the online services down, that makes it even harder. I don't regret overcoming that challenge, but it goes to show that there was a fundamental reason why this game is not so popular. As I played the game, I could not help but compare it to Monster Hunter. This appears at first one case where Nintendo was taking a page out of another popular game and yet not understand what made that series so popular and accessible. It was not until after I finished the game and sought to write this review that I began to understand why they made certain design choices, which had frustrated me so much throughout the game, and that this indeed was very distinct from Monster Hunter. For instance, while I said having a trading system could have helped, that would have detracted from the daily treasure box and the shop. Similarly, they needed some hook to get people to replay the levels. While I don't agree the execution was perfect, it is understandable. But I think tying the materials to the replay is not the best approach because it's more important to make sure players want to replay the levels for the fun and not because they have to. As I played the game almost entirely in local multiplayer, I cannot say how the experience would be in the now defunct online experience or playing the whole thing in single player. I personally found dealing with the doppels to be tedious, and I believe that is what turned me off from the game in the first place. That and the randomness of the treasure chest. While that is supposed to encourage replaying the levels, there are some levels I was too annoyed with to want to retry. That's when I was glad the daily treasure shop and the daily shop were integrated. You could say these two things saved the game for me. The shop especially does a good job of providing the materials we needed. One concern I would have for online multiplayer would be the connection. Even in local multiplayer, with everyone sitting on the same couch, we would often encounter connection instability at levels. I can only imagine that it would be worse in online multiplayer. It really is a pain, because if the connection is lost, then you are kicked out of the level. In terms of game vision, I think the team did a fairly good job of letting it guide them through. The totem mechanic is used almost everywhere. The items and boss design are well thought out. Even a technically simple boss like the seventh area gave us a lot of trouble just due to how much it tests your team's coordination. They also included a few features to facilitate cooperative play. As a result, it's hard to fault the developers on the concept. The concept is actually good and a lot of fun. Before I dive into the developer interviews, I do want to think about what could have been going through their minds and why they made some decisions, as well as what strategies could we have taken to address them. This is just a fun little exercise, and let's just assume that maybe they did not have the time or the budget to fix every issue. The first difficulty is getting the team together. Region locking this game was a weird choice. I would think for this game to succeed, it would have been critical to be able to get as many people able to play together as possible, rather than segmenting an already small audience. Games like Super Smash Bros. For the 3DS were not region locked for local multiplayer, so this does make the decision questionable. But let's consider some potential regions for region lock. One would be a game chat. However, this game uses stickers and has no voice chat, so that cannot be it. Another case could be maybe the games were different. Typically, Western versions had some alterations. However, since the game released within days of each other worldwide, I do not think this is the case either. Third could be an unstable network connection. That could be why online multiplayer would be region locked, but would that necessarily prevent local? For example, if you made the matchmaking server-based, then it should not be difficult to allow local multiplayer to work cross-region. Of course, I may make it sound easy, but it can be difficult. When you consider all of the various features that go into making this game, if it ended up being too difficult to implement, perhaps it just was not worth the cost for what few people may actually use, just due to the fact that the 3DS was region locked. A second issue of concern is how much other players get in the way. When bombs are coming and you accidentally pick up a teammate instead of the bomb and then take double the damage, it's just horrible. Why would that be implemented? Well, if we think about it, it technically sounds correct to prioritize picking up teammates, as much of the game is based upon the totem mechanic. The totem mechanic is a bit difficult to pull off, so things that help make that more smoother should be implemented. However, especially when there are 3 or 4 bombs being thrown at you and there is nowhere to run, being able to get rid of the bombs should be prioritized instead. Maybe if there was a ranking system for what would be prioritized when you pick things up. For example, first bombs, then players, then other items, then maybe it would be smooth. But unless we actually could code that and test it, we would not know if that would work. But let's get into that totem mechanic now. The totem mechanic is used everywhere, and it is very hard to coordinate. There is extra work trying to figure out who needs to pick up whom and in which order, something we still had trouble even in local multiplayer. It is also so easy with just one hit and the totem falls apart. This makes it where the risk is a bit more than the reward. It is a very frustrating experience. This is why I did say I think players are picked up too easily, but that is not the right solution. Once someone is picked up, they actually cannot get down on their own. If they could, that could make this experience less frustrating. But then again, especially with no voice chat, if people just got down when you were trying to pick them up to do something, then maybe that would ruin the experience. So maybe not having the ability to get down on your own was the right call. As for the totem mechanic itself, I do think for the whole totem to fall apart, I think this goes against the vision as the central mechanic has a bit too many negatives. Now, the next thing people ask about, if prior games have 4-player multiplayer, why is Triforce Heroes limited to 3? I believe that is due to the totem mechanic. The middle player loses the most agency, and if you have 2 players there, that would make it even more complicated. 3 was likely the sweet spot for a puzzle design regarding the totem. If you think about it, sometimes it's confusing to know if you need a 2 totem or a level 3 totem, plus with the water rod, which can make it go even higher. Some enemies you have to hit them at a 2 level, some enemies you have to hit them at a 3 level. And if you add a 4th level, yes, that could make things very difficult to handle. Also, to keep in mind that there is the single player mode, and if you had to get 4 players to the end, that could be very tedious. But why that requirement that everyone must reach the goal? Sure, the total mechanic is required, but if we look at Mario games, they always just warped the players who were behind. So why not in this game? My guess here is to invoke a feeling of team accomplishment, leaving no player behind to ensure that veterans don't abandon their team is likely the reason. If the team advances without each member doing something, then the weaker players would probably get demotivated and stop playing. By forcing everyone to cooperate, theoretically that is where the best experience is. However, I would have liked if that was not required for single player mode. I think that would have made it a lot more bearable. Speaking of cooperation, I already mentioned having a trading system would be nice. I've also mentioned how that could go against the vision of the game. Is that really an issue? Well, thinking about it more, I guess you can't say that a trading system can potentially cause team friction if someone is unwilling to trade. Could especially be an issue for online play, such as a party member refusing to cooperate due to not getting the trade they desire. As a result, yeah, I guess it's fair to not have a trading system. This cooperation being a pillar is probably why voice chat does not exist either. It sounds counterintuitive, but the game is frustrating. As a result, there would probably be some profanity thrown around if there was voice chat. While people may be fine with that if you are with friends, the nature of the 3DS also allowed adding strangers, and the online play also allowed playing with strangers. As stories of Xbox Live Chat circulated, Nintendo decided it wanted to focus on protecting its audience, and even then, they still had cases where users were being abusive. While I can understand not being able to voice your instruction or freely discuss puzzles, if you were playing with friends, you did have methods of chatting, such as with Skype at the time, Hangouts at the time, Discord, or in Japan, Line. Also, considering the weak network connection, adding voice chat could have made that problem worse. A third reason, which was stated in an interview, is that if veterans just said exactly what to do, then the less skilled players may not enjoy the game so much. Considering that is exactly how we played, and my kids still pick up the game very often, I don't think that reason is so strong. One annoyance I had was once you got the materials needed, you would need to leave the party to get the costumes. There was a guy in the lobby who could show you the costumes, what materials were needed, and where you could find the materials. But the fact that you would have to leave multiplayer to make the costume, I think really goes against the spirit of the game. I could imagine that it would be horrible online when it takes a long time to get a good party, only to need to break it as part of the loop. Sure, it supports in-game continuity, but it really is a pain. Perhaps my biggest issue, though, is the lack of a two-player cooperative mode. The fact that it's either 3 or 1 makes finding enough people to play with even harder, especially if you factor the cost of the 3DS in the game. 4 Swords at least worked with 2. I think enabling two-player play could have worked. Letting the two players swap between all three, like in Pikmin 3, would have reduced the barrier of entry. Considering they had the system in single player, I think it was only a matter of time and effort to implement a two-player equivalent. From what I read, single player itself was not initially planned until requested by Aonuma, so perhaps that was it. However, we will come back to this when we get to the developer interviews. So, after playing the game and beating it, my initial thoughts was the game was not as boring as I had initially expected when I had played that demo all those years ago. Granted, this time I actually had two people to play with. It also turned out to be a very trying experience, as I had to deal with two players who are not as skilled as me, but I could not necessarily compensate for their lack of skill. On one hand, it forced them to improve, but it also made me feel like I was held back for so long. At the same time, single player mode was a bit too tedious, so I had rather played multiplayer despite those frustrations. But there are good stuff here. Perhaps with more work, it could have been really special. At the time when I wrote this review, I thought it was just an okay game with some ups and downs. But those were my initial thoughts. let's come back to that after we listen to what the kids thought and what the developers said, as well as my experience in the post game. Let's start with the gaming kid. This kid has played games for a few years and likes to play various games, such as Pokemon, or Kirby, or Mario. For The Legend of Zelda, this child played Echoes of Wisdom and really loved the experience. For Triforce Heroes, this child said the first levels, despite being easy, were good for learning how to play. They really enjoyed the challenging levels. Even after we defeated the game, we continued to play together to complete the various special challenges, and this kid would often just go and start playing game by himself. Some of the favorite combat mechanics were the sword beam, using bombs, and the boomerang. However, once they got the hammer outfit and saw how powerful it was, it quickly became a favorite. For the areas, they especially liked the 8th one as really fun, despite its high difficulty. When you got the birds to fly with, they had a very much fun time. The puzzles that also relied on colors were highlighted, and the final boss was called out as a good level of challenge. The areas they did not like include the credits being too long and unskippable, getting tired of replaying the water level just due to how many times we had to replay it, but we didn't get the item desired. And also that some outfits were no longer needed by the time they were unlocked. This opinion was before we did the post-game content, which did utilize a lot of areas. As I mentioned before, after we completed the main story, they dove right into single player, so it's safe to say they liked the game. The other kids, while occasionally dipping into some games, they actually never completed a game. So I say this is very telling that the first game this child has actually completed was not Princess Peach Showtime, not a Kirby game, not a Yoshi game, not a Pokemon game. It was Triforce Heroes, a game that is difficult but got this child's attention, and they kept requesting to play. As I mentioned before, they were initially recruited because we needed a third person, but being lured in by the various outfits, especially the dresses, did its job, and we were able to play. The first levels were accessible, and this child likes to keep replaying them. I think one aspect that helps makes this an easier experience for new people is that there are no menus. As a result, the controls are easier than other games. You only have your sword, pick up, totem, and one item. As I mentioned, they like to replay the easier levels, but I do also see the joy when they played and got better in the later levels. And as a result of playing this game, I have seen this child dip into playing more games. Sure, they still drop out of playing those games, but I think that emphasizes that Triforce Heroes is special. This kid will play Triforce Heroes as long as the rest of us, sometimes even longer. If that is not a testament to the game being good, I don't know what is. Now that we've covered the two kids' opinions who both have high praise, let's consider what the developers actually said about the choices they made. So for this section, I went diving into various interviews and videos to learn more. I will share the insights I got, but in order to have the more complete picture, I had to combine multiple sources. As such, I will put the sources in the description. The first question, and a very common one, was why Triforce Heroes? This was asked in many places, but the answer was pretty simply they wanted to make another multiplayer Zelda game. It looks like it was Aonuma who initiated it. He said a large factor was the player feedback they got for Four Swords, which they had re-released for the 25th anniversary. However, Shikata, the director, was also into the idea. He said for his part, he was inspired by the switching control mechanic in Spirit Tracks, which was also when he joined the Zelda team. One aspect the director said of Four Swords is they felt it was a bit competitive, so here they wanted to focus more on cooperative decisions, and I do believe we see that throughout the game. Getting Triforce Heroes approved was actually smoother than A Link Between Worlds. Once they showed Miyamoto a prototype of the three-player gameplay, he got very into it and approved it. The engine uses the same as A Link Between Worlds, but rather than focusing on the art assets or the world, they said it was more because the engine was a good fit for the game they wanted to make. In the interview with Game Informer, Shikata said, when we finished up A Link Between Worlds, we looked at the game engine, and Mr. Aonuma had talked with the team about wanting to create a multiplayer Zelda game and really wanted to take a look at whether or not that system was something they could use to accomplish that goal. So more than art assets or visiting the same worlds, it's more about does a game's engine and system we have work with this next idea, and do they match up? And in this case, they did. When it came to picking the number of players, they settled on 3 for a few reasons. First is the totem mechanic. By having 2 players in the middle, they would be bored quite often. In addition, due to the verticality, it could make the players look small due to how far they would have to move the camera. Another reason relates to cooperation. When there are only 3 players, they saw that people would stay closer together. As a result, 3 players became the focus, and the dungeons were designed for 3-player co-op. Single-player mode was not initially planned, but was requested by Aonuma. They did consider implementing a 2-player mode too. However, they felt that it complicated things too much. For example, if there was a doppel both players could switch to, they could ruin each other's plans. To me, that sounded more like an issue the fact that online play lacked voice chat. When asked if it would be better to quickly drop another player in when one player left, they did respond that they thought it would be confusing and disorienting for the new player. So instead, they decided it was better to take the team back to the lobby so that they could start again and quickly find a new player. When it came to dealing with bad actors, there were 2 strategies the developers had in mind. First was the block list. This was the obvious one. The second, though, was that players could disconnect to leave a party. The fact that disconnection was one of their strategies makes me think they did not imagine that it would actually be a strategy of bad actors. I could not find any interviews that took place after the introduction of hero points, but based off what I had read in a blog, it sounds to me that it was an added strategy to reward cooperative spirit, as blocks would reduce the hero points, but if you didn't get your peak in the roulette, you could get hero points. To help reduce the occurrences of players disconnecting, they had actually aimed to make the levels take between 12 and 15 minutes rather than the longer dungeons in traditional Zelda games. As a result, the levels do have a different feeling, but this was made due to the fact that you are playing with other people. For the level design, the three-player gameplay again guided it as they filled mini sticky notes with ideas. The lack of voice chat was another common topic. While local multiplayer would have people yelling and laughing so loud in the offices at Nintendo, as shared in the Treehouse Live sessions, something Shikata noticed while on Four Swords was how a veteran would often dictate to the new player what to do. From his point of view, this was not very fun. So, taking inspiration from Line, which is a popular chat service in Japan, they incorporated stickers. The style of the stickers even matched the style that you would see in Line, which have a few official Nintendo stickers. A common point they made in these interviews as well is that by restricting people to stickers, it can make the communication feel more like a puzzle from both sides. And as a result, the people who did not know the dungeons did not feel as discouraged. For the Share Hearts feature, Aonuma actually said he thought it was the best part of co-op gameplay. If we think about it, by mandating shared hearts, you must cooperate, as opposed to throwing teammates off a cliff for the fun of it. As for how Outfit Spiller came to be, there are many stories about that. In one case, the director said how Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks had you collect materials to upgrade things. In A Link Between Worlds, you could power up items, but the director said he also wanted to be able to enhance other abilities such as swimming in lava using the Goron outfit. In addition, for Triforce Heroes, they also wanted to make it easy for players to convey their progress, as you could play with the same people but also play with different people. Finally, by having different outfits modifying different abilities, you could alter the experience even when playing the same dungeon repeatedly. As a result of all of these influences, they decided outfits were the best choice. As for other games, the director said he did have some experience with Monster Hunter or MMOs, but he also thought the way that outfits modify abilities and items felt unique to Triforce Heroes. When asked by Game Informer about the similarities with Destiny, the director said he hadn't played that title and so it had no influence. The team did mention they had some concerns with Link wearing a dress for some of the outfits. They wanted to add some variety, but in the interview with Polygon, they said they researched in both Japan and the US and found that it would not cause a serious negative reaction. Instead, their hope was that it would increase the appeal to women. As they said in Polygon, while there are a lot of aspects of Triforce Heroes that will appeal to young boys, we did think that by including outfits like the legendary dress, that we would broaden that appeal to some of our younger female gamers as well. As for the design process, they elaborated in an interview with Nintendo Dream, which Nintendo Everything has translated. When it came to the outfit design, the designer Keisuke Umeda said they had three principles. The first thing is to make the effect of the costume easy to understand. Then comes making it look interesting and easily recognizable with colors. Designs were made while keeping these three things in mind. As an example of the process, they discussed the cheerleader outfit. The effect here is to increase the energy gauge of the other players. When they evaluated their initial idea of using a pop idol, they realized that this image would work in Japan but not in other countries. So, to make it more recognizable, they opted for a cheerleader. Something that you may notice if you play the Japanese version is the energy gauge is called the Gambari gauge. Gambari is something you would hear when you are cheering for people. However, there is a case where one outfit was created just to give player access to other features. The timeless tunic was created to allow the player to freely listen to 8-bit like music. This music was created due to the memory limitations of download play. As a result, they could not share the original music. But having no music was not a pleasant experience, so the sound staff realized using NES-like music would be small enough to fit within the bandwidth. This ended up being a lot of work for them as they redid everything, but they were passionate to get it done. And since they had put in the work and players may want to listen to it, they created the Timeless Tunic. In other concept arts, they shared drafts for the tri-suit and the showstopper. The tri-suit is meant for everyone to wear, and so they needed a design that works well together. For the showstopper, its purpose was to attract the attention of enemies. They even showed a Pikmin-like concept for the princess's cursed outfit. But in an interview with Game Informer, they had shared about one more outfit they were looking to implement, and that was to be inspired by the Emperor's New Clothes story. However, as such an outfit had nothing, it was not made. And yes, all puns were intended. As for the items in the game, the guiding principle was to pick ones that worked for the three-player co-op. Items that could help with movement like the boomerang, the gust jar, and the grip shot were picked. Even traditional items like bow and bombs take on new properties with the totem mechanic. Though examples of some items that did not make the cut include the lantern, which was converted into an outfit, hover boots, and the tornado rod. For the tornado rod, they thought that this opposed the totem mechanics, so they dropped it. As for the story, they acknowledged that it leaned on the lighter side. The reason why the story is so lighthearted and silly is because of the focus on the clothing mechanic. As they developed things, it naturally turned into a lighthearted story. And since they wanted the three-player gameplay to be the focus, they wanted to make sure that it was easy for anyone to pick up and have fun with. In addition, Miyamoto and Aonuma like making jokey games because it is hard to place jokes in more serious titles. In addition to these interviews, I did look into a blog post and found that some people would complain about others dropping online if they did not get the level they wanted. I can't imagine that probably soured the experience. But they called out that the hero points and the block system combined made this as a means to discourage this behavior. Considering that hero points can also get you some rewards that are exclusive to the Colosseum, that is nice. While it does help a bit, it does not feel as good as the proper dropout system. One complaint about the hero point system is that it makes the base outfit better, which technically removes the hard mode. Probably I think it would have been better if they had designed a new outfit for the bonus. I think the interesting insight from those interviews was that disconnecting was an escape avenue. That could make sense as in development it is more likely that developers were more cooperative and therefore did not think that this would be abused so much. To be fair, the disconnection also happens a lot accidentally, just due to the design of the original 3DS models, as there were many points where one player would have to do nothing but wait. The kids ended up fiddling with the console, which of course created more problems. So after I had already written my review, we continued to play the game and tackled the various trials. I was at first fine with dropping the game after rolling credits, but as my kids were really into it, that even the non-gaming kids kept asking to play, and this was now our routine, we went straight into the ninth zone. This one was always there, but since we were focused on the main campaign at the time, we never tried it. And here the rules are slightly different. In some cases, hard drops could be almost non-existent, and in addition, you only have one fairy. But as the levels can lead into the next one, if you do a good run, then you can stock up on fairies. Lastly, every stage in this was a trial of combat. And after a very long journey, we made it to the last level where we just continued to get pummeled by the final challenge despite trying various strategies. This is one case where single player is easier than multiplayer. But after many failed attempts, the kids and I finally overcame it and claimed our prize. But the experience of playing that level in single player for me also made me realize that it has its charms. Maybe it's more the earlier levels are more tedious, but when it comes to these challenging levels, single player does have its advantages. Perhaps my main gripe with single player is actually that switching is not as smooth as I would like it to be. I kept hitting the X button despite knowing that it takes a picture instead. But I really wanted that button to be the switch mechanic instead, so that I would not have to take my eyes off of the combat. And when it came to tapping on the screen with that hectic combat, I would often mistakenly tap the wrong character. It is an interesting thing that I am finding that I enjoy the game much more after I beat it than when we started. My guess is the stress of getting things initiated, storing, getting in the way at first, and the challenge of mentoring two lower skilled players made it a more frustrating experience. Even then, I actually did want to continue playing. It would only be after maybe an hour of two of failures when I would have to take a break. But then we would pick it up and play it again the next day. Hearing the developers' opinions was an interesting experience. It does help address some of the frustrations, even if I disagree with some of their decisions. While they could not handle the dropout situation, I do hope they take that as a lesson for the next time they attempt a multiplayer Zelda title, which was a fun experience, just as Aonuma said, and he did express a desire to make another one. And with the Switch 2 and the Game Share feature, which also supports the original Switch, I think this is a good opportunity for them to try again. And when they do try it again, I'm sure my kids will be very interested to play. Until then, they will continue to play Triforce Heroes. Before I close off, I want to share one more note. If you read through the interviews, you will see that the DS wireless capabilities was a factor for doing Triforce Heroes. You may wonder why the DS did not have a multiplayer Zelda title itself. I actually recall back in the 2000s when searching for news on The Legend of Zelda that there was a Four Swords game in development for the DS. Not the anniversary release, but instead a game complete with 3D models using the cel-shaded graphics. In the end, we got Phantom Hourglass instead, but I am curious if anyone has information about that development. and then we could see how that could have influenced Triforce Heroes. It is really hard to find information on that title now. Google was unhelpful, so I decided just to dive through IGN's history and eventually found one article that confirmed it. Sadly, this article did not have the screenshots, but I do remember seeing all four, including purple, in 3D. Some places indicate this project never existed, but I feel like I did see it on the official Nintendo website. That is it for this video. Thank you for listening to my thoughts and experience playing this title. It may not be the best Zelda game, but it is an interesting experience and can be fun. And I hope we do get another multiplayer title that improves upon it. I do also want to give a special shout out to Legendary Adventures, whose great content likely influenced me to give this title another chance. As I mentioned in the beginning, this video itself is an experiment. If you want to see more content like this, please leave a like and share so that I know there is an audience for this. Did you play Triforce Heroes? If so, what was your opinion of it? And if you had skipped Triforce Heroes, why was that? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, and I hope to see you next time.